Modern Warfare Zombies is one of the most polarizing zombies modes to ever exist. Originally, when it was announced, most of us were expecting an Outbreak 2.0, but through leaks, we later learned that it is going to be more similar to DMZ, but with zombies and without PvP. I will admit, I was immediately disinterested in a mode like this unless there was going to be a round-based mode alongside it, which of course never ended up happening. Regardless, I gave the mode a chance, and I will say it's much more of a mixed bag than I originally expected. There's some good, there's some bad, and there's some downright awful things about it. So today, we're going to break down all of this in one giant review of the entire Modern Warfare 3 Zombies experience. Let's get into this. Let's start off with talking about the general gameplay loop of MWZ. So of course, you come into the map on Urzikstan, which of course this is the only map playable within this mode, and you get 45 minutes to an hour to just do whatever you want within the map itself. And there's actually quite a lot of things you're able to do. There's contracts, there's just general looting around the map. You can just go building to building looting if you'd like. You can do missions, you can do the Dark Aether rifts, you can do the story missions, you could defeat the warlords. And in general, as you're doing all this, you're getting loot, you're getting items, you're getting schematics, and then you exfil with this stuff, and then you can bring the stuff back into the next game next time you play. Now, in theory, this gameplay loop doesn't sound like a bad thing on paper, but in gameplay, I feel like it doesn't really work that well. One of the main issues is the low stash size that you're able to keep. You're only able to hold up to 20 items in your stash at a time. So basically what your stash is a completely separate inventory that you get to bring your items in from the actual matches themselves, and then you get to put it and store it into your inventory through the menus. And then those items you can now bring in whenever you want. But only being able to have 20 items in your inventory is just not nearly enough. Now, there is a schematic that allows you to get up to 30 items, but even this just really isn't enough. The main issue here is that you constantly feel like you have to use your stash items, because if you go into a match to try to get other items, then of course you're gonna be able to only save those items if you actually use other items that are currently in your inventory. During the early months of this game, I didn't think it was a big deal because there weren't a lot of items in the game in the first place, but now there are so many different items in the game when you take into account all of the items that have been added throughout all the seasons. I constantly feel like I'm jumping into a match and using items I didn't really want to use previously, but I know I have to because I have to save room within my stash itself. And a lot of the times when I jump into a game, I'm just going to replace that same item I just used with the exact same item. For example, you go into a match and you use an epic wrench, for example, to get your weapon up to epic rarity. And then you go into a match, eventually you're going to find another epic wrench, and then boom, you're now bringing the epic wrench back to your stash. So you're literally just replacing it with the exact same item. There's no like progression there. It's just the exact same item. I use it, and then I just get the exact same item again through the match. But that's also only if you're actually doing things that'll result you in getting those items, because not everything in the match will result you in getting those items. For example, tier 3 usually does not give you any epic wrenches. You're not going to get those out of those contracts. You might get legendary wrenches, you're not getting the epic wrenches unless you go to the Dark Aether. So unless you force yourself to go to the Dark Aether, you're not going to even have a chance of earning that item back. But of course, there are other ways to get the items you want. There are ways to earn items in the match itself. You can actually just go around the map and just do contracts and get the items from there. You can hit the mystery box for a chance at the wonder weapons, or of course, if you want an epic tier weapon, you could just get it from the mystery box. Of course, there's also schematics, which are these things you're able to earn in the game, bring it out of the match, and then you get the schematic forever. And you basically get the item from the schematic every X amount of hours or even X amount of days, depending on the schematic. So basically you get one use of it per X hours. So you might be wondering, well, what's the problem? There's all these different ways of getting items in the game. Why is it such a big deal that your stash size is only 20 if you have all these other ways of getting items? Well, here's the thing. Most of these ways of getting items are revolving around one huge thing, and that is, of course, RNG. And RNG is not necessarily a bad thing because, I mean, Zombies is built around RNG. I mean, you got the mystery box, the Wonder Fizz machine, at least the classic Wonder Fizz machine. Power-ups drop randomly. Some Easter egg steps have RNG. RNG is such a big part of the Call of Duty Zombies experience, and that's completely okay. But the problem with Modern Warfare Zombies' RNG is that it is really, really rough and really, really unfair. There are some schematics in this game that I still don't have simply because of RNG, and I've played a lot of this game. I have done a lot of tier 3 contracts. I want to say at least like 500, and there are still 1 or 2 contracts that you normally would get from tier 3 that I still have yet to get. That is insane. And there's absolutely no way for me to like just do something to earn it faster or guarantee it. There's no way to do that. You just have to rely on luck. And you can play as many games as you want. You can do as many contracts as you want. If the game decides you're not going to get that item, you're just simply not going to get that item. I thought we were done with the days of RNG, supply drop type stuff in Call of Duty. And I know obviously this is not the same as supply drops because you can't gamble your money in it, but you're still gambling your time away. You're still spending all this time putting into the matches, and you feel like you're wasting your time because you're just not getting the items that you need to get or that you want to get. And then when it comes to just getting items in the game itself, because of the 45-minute time limit, you really don't have time to sit there and deal with bad RNG. I've had many matches where I'm sitting there hitting the mystery box again and again and again because I'm trying to get a specific weapon or a specific wonder weapon or whatever it may be, and I just can't get lucky enough to get it, so I'm kind of just shit out of luck and there's not much I can do. Or you go into the Dark Aether and you try to do the different contracts there. You can't just keep doing the contracts. There's a time limit there. There's so many different time limits in this game that holds you back from just dealing with RNG. Sometimes RNG is not really a big deal in round-based zombies because I can sit there and I can wait a little bit. I'll deal with it. But you can't do that in MWZ because there is a time limit. It will be kicking you out at a certain point, and whatever items you brought in will be basically gone, assuming you, of course, use the items. So that is a big problem, and it definitely holds back what the gameplay flow could be within this mode. Another big issue with the gameplay loop is the fact that there's no solo mode. Obviously, this has massive negative implications for the future of the mode because it essentially means that this mode will not survive forever. There is literally zero way to play this mode by yourself. So how are you actually going to even play in 5, 6, 7 years from now when there's barely any lobbies to be found? I really don't know how that's going to work. The game mode was essentially built around having multiple people in your lobby at a time, and they never even thought once to add a solo mode. And beyond just that, there's actually way more reasons why I wanted a solo mode for so long in this game, and one of the main reasons is that people can be kind of annoying in this mode. There are many situations where other players can negatively impact your experience, sometimes without even them meaning to. I've had games where people just run up to me non-stop and just keep spamming that invite button to try to invite to their group, or the other option, which is to try to join your group and to request that. It's just so obnoxious, and I've had many games like that, and there's other situations where they'll come in and steal your loot off the ground. Obviously, they can't steal your loot if it's in one of the orbs, but if it's ground loot, they can steal it, and that's really frustrating. And there's a lot of other stuff that we're going to talk about later in this video where other players can actually take things from you, and it is just so frustrating. And a lot of times, yes, I don't want to be playing with other people. I want to have that solo experience that I've usually always had playing zombies. It was so weird to have a zombies mode that just doesn't have a solo option whatsoever. It's also really frustrating when other teams steal contracts from you, and especially when you're in tier 3 trying to do contracts. If there's a lot of teams there, those contracts are gone, and it's really hard to find the good contracts that you want. And speaking of contracts, let's now talk about contracts in Modern Warfare Zombies. They're not that great. There's a couple that are kind of fun to do, and it really depends on the tier you're in or whether you're in the Dark Aether, but some of them really do suck, unfortunately. My least favorite ones are the ones that have anything to do with the soldier enemies. Those are like the worst enemies to go up against because it just completely lacks that zombies feel. I don't want to be fighting soldiers in a zombies mode. It's just not something I want out of it. I think there is a place that soldiers can have in this mode. Maybe putting them just in strongholds would be fine, but throwing contracts in the loop with the soldiers I just think was a really bad idea. You have, of course, defend ground station, which you have to just defend against the mercs. You have to defend this little area. And this one is kind of annoying because you have the ones with the riot shields that come down and try to attack you. Don't really enjoy this one too much, but it's one of the ones that's only in tier 1 and tier 2. So by a certain point, you're probably never going to do these again because, at least for me, I've only ever really go into tier 3 anymore or do the Dark Aether contracts. And because this one is not in tier 3 or the Dark Aether, you're probably never going to do it after a certain point again anyways. There's the Aether extractors, which you have to go around and disable 3 out of 5 Aether extractors. These ones usually have mercs that will attack you while you're doing it. There's the escort mission, which the escort one is decent. You have to escort this giant tank around the map, and it's kind of fun when it's in like the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. When you go to the Dark Aether, Aether, you were kind of required to use a VR11 or a lot of Casimirs in order to do it successfully. If you go in unprepared, you're not going to do it. It's just going to fail because it's pretty difficult. There's spore control, which you have to go around and throw this little device at different spores and then destroy the device with your bullets, and you only have to do that to 6 different spores. It's a pretty easy contract. There's the raid weapon stash contract, which all you have to do is defend a stash against some zombies, and then you take items out of the stash. Deliver cargo is probably the easiest one, where you simply just have to drive a truck to one part of the map to the other, and you have to avoid a helicopter shooting you while you're doing it. This one's very easy, but it's also really boring. Like, it's just driving around the map. Like, okay, like, it's just not interesting to me whatsoever. Eliminate the bounty is probably one of the better ones, because you actually get to like fight a boss zombie, especially if you're in tier 3. Getting to fight the Mega Abomination can be kind of fun, so I do enjoy the eliminate the bounty one. And then of course there's Outlast, which is simply just a lockdown type sequence where you're going into some area of the map and you just have to kill zombies while you try to survive in that area. It's a pretty simple one as well. I would say Bounty and Outlast are definitely the top 2 contracts, or the most fun ones to do, and they're also not too challenging or too difficult, so I would definitely prefer doing those more than any other ones. But of course, contracts are not the only thing you can do in the game to get loot. You can also do ether nests or infested strongholds. These were actually really cool when the game first came out. I thought they were really fun. I thought they were really interesting because they actually had a zombies feel to it. The rest of the map doesn't really have that zombies feel to it, but these areas did. It's just the way they looked, the creepiness of them, really enjoyed it. But over a certain period of time, they started to get kind of repetitive, and the loot in them is usually not that amazing, especially compared to loot you're going to get later on in the game. So you're probably never going to go back to these after a certain point in your playthrough throughout the year. I know in the first month of the game being out, I did them pretty frequently to try to get loot, but like I said, later on, you're probably never going to do them again. And there's also this really awful screen glitch that completely ruins the vision that you have with the gas mask on. Not everyone has this glitch, only some people do. I believe they fixed it by now, thankfully, but for a long period of time, there was this awful glitch that just made any area where you have to put your gas mask on look absolutely terrible. Now, the one part of the game involving mercs that I actually do really enjoy are the merc camps and the merc strongholds, as well as the warlords. So I really think this system is quite interesting. It starts off with the merc camps. You have to go there first. They're very easy to take out. You just go there, kill the mercs, and you have to grab a merc stronghold key card. You grab that key card, you go to a merc stronghold, then you take out the stronghold. And then you have to now go into the safe, get an item out of the safe, which will give you access to one of the warlord areas. And there's all sorts of warlords around the map. They've added more in throughout the seasons, but at first, the first one was of course the Legacy Fortress, which was a really fun challenge. It was actually really difficult to get in there and actually take out this warlord, but you go in there and you have this whole base of enemies trying to attack you and kill you. And the reason why I like this aspect of mercs in this game is because they're not like invading the other parts of the mode. They're very much specifically centered in their own areas. They're in their strongholds, they're in their camps, they're in the fortress, they're only in those places. So they're out of the way. If you don't want to ever do anything with the mercs, you could play the whole game without ever going to anything related to mercs at all. You could do that. Of course, if you want to do the missions, you're going to have to kill some of the mercs for some of the challenges, but for most of them, you don't have to do anything with them. And I like that aspect of this mode genuinely. Even though it does take away from the zombies feel, you do have a choice there. You have a choice to just never touch these guys ever again, or you can go in there and try to kill the warlord, which actually killing the warlord is kind of useful because you can get a wonder weapon case out of it. So that is pretty cool. My only issue with how the warlord works is that only one of them spawn in per game. I don't really know why they couldn't just have them all be available every single match. So if you wanted to do one specific warlord, you can do it whenever you want in any match. But with how it works now that they especially have a bunch of different warlords, you actually can't choose which one you want to do each match. You just have to kind of get lucky. And now they're all pretty similar, and again, the rewards are kind of similar, but sometimes there's just certain warlords you want to do more than others, and like I said, you don't really have the choice in that. Another huge thing you can do in this game are the missions. Now, missions are something that are a one and done sort of a thing where you do it once and you can't just go back and do it again, because once you complete it, you get the reward for it, and that's basically it. But there are certain missions that you're able to do again, such as the story missions, which I do like that they let you do those more than once, because the story missions are definitely the best part of the missions. But essentially how the missions work is you have 3 acts worth of missions, and there's plenty of missions within them, and each of them end in a story mission. The story mission almost plays off like a campaign mission in a sense, where it basically just takes you through it. It's not like an Easter egg or anything like that where you're trying to solve it. You literally are just being told exactly where to go and what to do. And I would say out of all three of the acts, the Act 3 story mission is definitely the best one because it has the worm boss fight, which we'll talk about the boss fights a little bit later. Act 1 and 2 don't really have the best story missions. They're not really that exciting, but they're still there. And I think when I first did them, maybe it was a little more exciting than what we're used to in the Modern Warfare Zombies experience. But nowadays, thinking back on it, they're really not that exciting. There's also Act 4, which includes all of the missions that were added throughout the DLC cycles, and those involve the Dark Aether. And again, we'll talk all about that later. But in terms of the Act 1, 2, and 3 missions, the main missions that lead up to the story missions, most of them weren't too good in my opinion. Most of them revolved heavily around RNG, or were just doing the most pointless, busy work tasks imaginable. Act 1 wasn't too bad because most of the missions involved doing things that you were probably going to do regardless anyways, like getting a certain amount of kills with pack-a-punch weapons or using different fuel upgrades, which obviously is kind of interesting because it gets you to use other items in the game. It also got you to use other ammo mods, and I do like when video games encourage you to use other items. Maybe not in this way exactly, but at least it's better than not encouraging it at all. But whenever you come across a specific mission that requires a heavy amount of RNG, it is always such an annoyance. Just as some examples, there was one mission in Act 1 that required you to get ammo mod circuit boards and use them on these turrets around the map. And of course, if you know what ammo mod circuit boards are, they are not guaranteed. You have to find them through looting. So what you basically have to do is go around the map, trying to loot as much as you can to find specific ammo mod circuit boards that you need for these turrets. By the way, I've never used these ammo mod circuit boards ever again after this mission, but it was just such a frustrating experience because it was so full of RNG. There was another one filled with RNG in Act 2 that involved killing certain HVTs, and you had to get the specific HVTs you needed. And of course, you're not guaranteed any HVTs because they're kind of random every time you do them. And there was one time where I had to specifically get the Disciple HVT from that contract, and I kid you not, I tried it almost 30 different times, 30 different HVT contracts, and I did not get the Disciple once, which is absolutely insane. We're going to talk about bugs and glitches a bit more later in the video, but there was a really frustrating glitch that completely ruined my launch experience with the missions, and this was the fact that one of my missions was simply just not progressing. Now, this was happening with a lot of players actually, where their missions just didn't progress at all, but sometimes over like the course of a couple times doing it, it would eventually progress. But for me, it was not progressing at all. There was absolutely no way to do it. It was specifically the Act 2 Mission 1 mission, and this was of course the mission where you just simply had to do one of those cargo delivery contracts. That was pretty much the whole mission. You had to do that. You had to also destroy the helicopter and I think destroy the truck after finishing. It was a really weird mission, but that's all you had to do. I tried it over like 100 times, and I'm not even exaggerating by saying that. I was quite literally spending so many days just constantly trying to do that same exact mission because I wanted to get all the way to the end so I can do that Act 3 mission with the whole worm boss fight, but it just simply was not tracking the progress. Now, once Season 1 dropped with the Dark Aether update, they finally fixed the issue and it finally worked for me, and I was actually able to progress through the missions. I was so happy that I was able to get through it finally, but it was just such a frustrating month-long process of constantly trying the same mission again and again. And I was talking to Activision support, or at least trying to get in contact with them, and I just couldn't get a hold of them. So I really didn't know if this was actually a glitch or not, or if I was doing something wrong. I just had absolutely no idea. Definitely one of the worst glitches, and definitely really affected how these missions worked, at least for me. Now, at the end of the day, I am glad these missions exist because it did give players a lot to do when the game first came out, but I do feel like these missions don't feel like they were designed to be fun. They just feel like they're purely there for retention. They feel like they're there to get players playing the game as much as possible, as soon as possible, because if you know you have to do all these missions, which some of which require a lot of time, and you have to do all of them to get to Act 3 to finally get to that boss fight, they know that players are probably going to feel addicted to it. They're going to feel like they have to get through it, and they have to spend all that time trying to get through all the missions, which inevitably will take up at least like 15 hours of time. Like, I think most players were taking a couple days, couple weeks even, to actually get through all these missions. It's not like a typical Call of Duty Zombies Easter egg where you could do it in like 2 hours after you figure out how to do it. Whereas this is something that does take a long time, a lot of separate games of playing. So if it was fun, I really wouldn't care, but I feel like a lot of the missions just weren't designed to be fun. They were designed to waste your time, and that is kind of the problem I have with it. And I want to loop this conversation back to schematics, because we were talking about schematics before being a system that is an interesting idea in theory, but the problem is it also feels like it's designed to waste your time. And I will say they definitely have made improvements over time where successfully exfilling does make it now so you are able to recharge your schematics quicker, you're able to get those items faster, but some of them still just don't really make any sense to me. There are some schematics that have like a 2-day wait time before you can use the item again, which is absolutely insane. Like, I get it, you're not supposed to only use schematics for your items, but again, you have to rely on RNG outside of it, so what are you going to do? You're going to have to wait for the schematics. So many players will literally just not play more of the game because their schematics aren't ready. They're going to wait 2 whole days to use it again, and there's some schematics that are like 6-hour waits, 7-hour waits, stuff like that. And well, that's just strange because, like, okay, what player is going to sit there and wait 5 hours to play again? They're not going to do that. They're just going to probably play the next day. But I do still appreciate them making some changes to schematics. Like I said before, I think it's definitely not as big of a deal anymore, especially this far into the life cycle. But there was many months throughout MWZ's life cycle where the schematic system was absolutely horrible and was really negatively impacting how enjoyable the game could really be. Because at the end of the day, I just felt like I was wasting my time grinding through this game and not really getting the items that I want to get. I'm just spending all these hours dealing with RNG, dealing with games that just don't go my way, and I just don't really like that experience. I think round-based zombies works so well because as long as you're skillful and you're knowledgeable on the mode, if you want to hop into a map and get an Easter egg done, get a side Easter egg done, you're pretty certain you're going to be able to do it at least within like 1 or 2 games. Like, it depends on how good you are at the game. Obviously, if you're shit at the game, it might take you a bit longer, but again, it just depends. But Modern Warfare Zombies just doesn't really feel like that. It feels like it's centered around just getting the perfect lobby, getting the perfect luck, and that doesn't always happen, unfortunately. I think proof that a lot of people don't like the gameplay flow of Modern Warfare Zombies was, of course, the Tombstone glitch that was happening pretty frequently from like seasons 1 and seasons 2 of Modern Warfare Zombies. Eventually, some aspects of it were patched, but if you guys don't know, there was a glitch early on in the season where you could essentially duplicate items, and you could also get a shit ton of money from utilizing this glitch. Now, I know this for a fact that a lot of people did this because almost every lobby I got into, my teammates were stacked with cash within like the first minute of the match. And obviously you aren't able to do that legitimately, so very clearly they were utilizing this Tombstone glitch, and it was definitely making the lobbies in a way more fun, which is weird because I normally wouldn't say that about zombies. I find it kind of annoying when you get into a Black Ops 3 public lobby and everyone's popping shopping frees and power vacuums and perkaholics. It just kind of turns into just a frenzy of the most overpowered things, and it's just not really the type of zombies experience I want to see. But in Modern Warfare Zombies, the core gameplay loop is just not that enjoyable for a lot of people because you're not always going to be able to get enough good items in time to actually enjoy it. So, like, people want to be able to spend the whole 45 minutes of the lobby using good items and actually like doing contracts in tier 3, going to the Dark Ether, stuff like that. But if you're spending your whole time just building up to that point, let's say you don't have all the schematics or you don't have a lot of items saved up, then you're going to have to just work from 0 to hero. That's not an easy thing to do in this mode, or at least it is something that takes quite a long time. So what people decided to do was, let's just start the game using this Tombstone glitch with all this cash, so you can just take your gun, go straight to tier 3, get all the perks, pack a punch your gun to tier 3, and boom, you're good. Like, that's what a lot of people were doing. And I personally never took part in the glitch myself, but I would always have teammates that would do it, and then they would just throw me cash, and then I would take the cash from them, and boom. Like I said, it would be a better experience than it was previously. And people were actually so annoyed that they eventually patched this glitch. Now, I'm happy they patched it because I do think the game needed to actually work the way it was intended to work, but it did kind of take away that fun that I was having with being able to just spawn in with everything, which, like I said, in round-based zombies wouldn't really necessarily be a good thing, but for some reason in Modern Warfare Zombies, it was a good thing. It's kind of weird how that works, but I think I explained it rather well. It was just because of the gameplay loop not being that fun by default, at least in those months of the game's life cycle. And I think by far my biggest issue with Modern Warfare Zombies was the large number of glitches and bugs throughout the entire life cycle. I have never had a worse experience when it comes to bugs and glitches in a Call of Duty experience. This is easily the worst it's ever been. I've already talked about a couple of those glitches I've had before, but believe me, there are so many more glitches that I haven't even discussed. I will have some video clips of them in the background of this video. You can definitely see there are a lot of problems, and this frequently happened. It was like almost every other game I was playing, some sort of glitch showed up. One of the main problems was, of course, crashing. A lot of times your game would crash and you would unfortunately lose everything. The only time you wouldn't lose your stuff is if it was a disconnect. If it was a disconnect, they eventually patched it later on in the life cycle where if you were to disconnect from the game, you would get all your loot back. So it basically just saves you from having to go back and, get all that stuff again. But if your game just crashes or something else happens, you just lose everything. Or like, let's say you have some sort of glitch in game that just gets you killed unfairly, which happened to me many times. Again, you would just lose your stuff. And it's a lot worse than round-based zombies because, like I've discussed before, there's a lot more time you have to put into the progression systems in this mode. Therefore, you feel like you're just wasting so many hours of your life when stuff like this happens. It just really is awful. Now, of course, this is subjective to your own personal experience. I've talked to many people who have told me that they haven't had any glitches in this game, or at least not a lot of glitches, and that's great. It seems like not everyone's having these problems. That's definitely a good thing. But of course, I just can't forget about the fact that these glitches did negatively impact my experience and has been negatively impacting my experience the entire time I've been playing this game. Now, things are starting to get a little too negative, so let's talk about something that I actually do really like, and this is the containment level. The containment level was added later into the life cycle of Modern Warfare Zombies, and essentially it's a way to reward players for consistently exfilling successfully. If you keep exfilling successfully, you bring up your containment meter little by little. The more contracts you do, the more it goes up. And every time you die and don't successfully exfil, you then have your containment level go down a bit. And you basically get rewards throughout the containment level. It goes up to 100, I believe, and you can keep going even beyond 100, but the rewards only go up to 100. And you get stuff like discounts on perks, you get discounts on the Pack-a-Punch, you start off with points right from the start, and it basically makes the game just a bit easier at the start. And what I was talking about before with the overall gameplay flow just not really working well with the 45-minute time limit, when you have all these different rewards, it actually makes it not as bad because now you have enough points to actually get stuff right from the start and you're able to get into the action a bit quicker, which I think is better for how this game is. So containment levels definitely improved this game quite a bit. Definitely happy Treyarch added it. Now, of course, one of the most important parts of a zombies mode is the actual weapons you're using to fight the undead. And this game does have a lot of options, especially with the amount of guns in the game, because there's Modern Warfare 2's weapons and Modern Warfare 3's weapons. So you just have this absolutely massive arsenal of guns to use. The only issue is I do feel like the guns don't feel that different from one another. It's this common problem that zombies modes have had ever since really Cold War Zombies, I feel like, where we have this rarity system and overall the point system just not being how it was in the past. So inevitably, I just choose the same couple of meta weapons most of my games anyways. There are other options, don't get me wrong, and if you're doing the camel grind, obviously you're going to use other guns. But for me personally, I stick to a couple different guns each game, and that's pretty much it. But it is nice to at least have such a large arsenal of weapons. Most of them are usable, most of them are weapons you can definitely mess around with and be successful with, so I definitely think that is a positive thing at the end of the day. In terms of wonder weapons, the game has a total of 4 wonder weapons. You have the ray gun, the Wunderwaffe, the Scorcher, and the VR11. And of course, the ray gun, the Wunderwaffe are weapons we've seen before. I guess technically the VR11 we have seen before as well, but it was very different than the VR11 we see in this game. I really do think the ray gun in this game is extremely disappointing, especially because of how amazing the Cold War Zombies ray gun is. It feels incredibly nerfed in this game. There's like a really slow fire rate to it. There's like a cap on how fast you can shoot it, and it just doesn't really operate as well as the ray gun did in Cold War. I feel like it kills bosses kind of slow, but it still is usable. It's a wonder weapon. It will help you for sure. The Wunderwaffe is fine. I mean, it's just like any other Wunderwaffe. It's not that useful, I would say, because this gameplay flow is very different than round-based zombies. I think it works a lot better when you're just going around training, but that's not really how you play Modern Warfare Zombies. It's not really easy to train considering the zombies run at you so fast in this mode, so you're better off just killing the zombies as soon as possible, and I wouldn't say the Wunderwaffe is great for that, so definitely not one of my favorite guns to use in this game, but it definitely is still useful nonetheless. The Scorcher is the brand new wonder weapon they added, and it's a really cool wonder weapon, but I don't really enjoy using it except for the fact that it allows you to fly in the air. That is the only good thing about it, in my opinion. I love the fact that I can get across the map nice and fast with it, and obviously it's very useful for the Dark Aether rifts because you can just get around quicker. But when it comes to just killing zombies, I don't know, there's something about the way it shoots, the way it fires, it's just not my type of wonder weapon, but it's definitely still useful nonetheless. My favorite wonder weapon in this game is definitely the VR11. You can shoot zombies, turn them into soldiers that will actually help you fight the zombies. You can also shoot soldiers like the mercs, and you can actually turn them into zombies, which is just so crazy and interesting. But it's also really good against bosses. It actually does a lot of damage, especially to the worm boss fights. You take this into the worm boss fights, you will destroy those bosses a lot quicker than you would otherwise. You can also shoot the tank in the escort contract, which will actually heal it back to 100%. So if you want to do the escort tank contracts in the Dark Aether, this is definitely the best weapon to use for it, because you're just going to be able to keep healing that thing back up, and it will basically be impossible to fail those contracts. So definitely recommend going for this wonder weapon if you're going into the Dark Aether. Then there's all sorts of weapons and items you can get from the schematics, and unfortunately I don't have all of them because guess what? There's RNG involved in actually earning these. Therefore, I do not have all of them because I'm not going to sit there trying again and again and again to just hopefully get lucky for these items. It's just unfortunately how the way it is, and like I said, I just don't like that aspect of this mode. But we're going to talk about the items that I do have because I actually have experience with them, therefore I can talk about how good or bad they are. First of all, we have the dog bone. Now the dog bone is pretty cool because it's actually not as something that's exclusive to the schematic, because you can actually get a friendly dog yourself just by doing a quest on the map involving the dog houses, which is really cool. But they do have a dog bone schematic that just gives you the friendly dog right away, and it's pretty cool. I mean, we had this in prior Zombies modes with friendly dogs, obviously with Blood Wolf Bite and Black Ops 4. It's pretty cool. I like having a friendly dog there. I don't think it's the best item ever, but it's definitely useful. It's something you should be using because it will help you. Next, we have the Aether Blade, and the Aether Blade might just be my favorite thing to use in this entire game. It's basically like the Tomahawk from Mob of the Dead, or also known as the Hell's Retriever. Basically, you throw it at the zombies, it kills a bunch of zombies, it goes from one zombie to the next and just demolishes them, and then you retrieve it. So you can just keep, you know, using it as much as you want. There's like a semi-recharge on it, takes a little bit of time to recharge, but just like the Hell's Retriever, you can just kind of keep throwing it pretty frequently, and it's really useful. It's not the best thing ever. It's not going to be killing boss zombies in one hit or anything like that, but it is really useful because of the fact that you have unlimited of them. You could just keep throwing it, and it's really fun and really satisfying to use it. So definitely one of the best items in the game for sure. Next, we have the golden armor plate, which is really useful. It'll actually refill your armor plates over time as you're killing enemies, just naturally. Like, you don't actually have to replate yourself. Now, you could still replate just to do it a bit faster, but the fact that it just happens over time is really useful because I hate the idea of constantly having to replate every time I get hit by zombies and I lose my armor. It's such a frustrating aspect of this mode. I really don't like that it's returning in Black Ops 6, unfortunately, but the golden armor plate basically solves that problem, so it's definitely one of the best schematics to use. Next, we have the Blood Burner Key. Now, the Blood Burner Key gives you easy access to the wonderful Blood Burner vehicle, which is a special vehicle within Modern Warfare Zombies. The only special vehicle in the entire mode, by the way. There's really nothing else that has that special zombies feel to it. And it's essentially just like a hellish looking motorcycle that allows you to not only just keep going infinitely without needing to refill it at the gas station, but it also has a lot more durability so it won't get destroyed easily. And you can also drive over water, which is insanely useful, especially in this mode where there are a decent amount of river areas. You can just drive right over them. It's insanely cool. I genuinely think one of MWZ's biggest missed opportunities was doing more things with vehicles. I feel like vehicles are kind of boring in this mode. They're just there to get you around the map and they don't really help you that much. The only thing that's actually that useful is, of course, the Blood Burner. But there should have been stuff like vehicle upgrades. You should have been able to bring your vehicle to a garage and like get it fixed up to add whatever sort of things you want on it. Maybe you can add a turret to the back of your truck, or you can add a plow to the front of your vehicle to make it so when you're hitting zombies, it's not doing any damage to the vehicle itself. Stuff like that would have just added so much replay value to using vehicles in the mode and would have made getting around the map probably a lot quicker as well, because you would actually have ways of making your vehicles better rather than just relying on the blood burners, because I feel like that's what you kind of had to do. You just kind of hope you're either going to find a blood burner or the fact that you're going to use the blood burner key to get it right away, because that's usually what I love to do, is just get the blood burner key and just use it right away, because that makes it so I can actually get to the contracts quicker and get some good items as fast as possible so I can spend more time in the lobby actually playing the game rather than just running around the map aimlessly, which is definitely one of the biggest issues I have with this experience. We also have mags of holding, which essentially just makes it so you don't have to reload ever again, which is obviously very useful and kind of overpowered in some cases, but it's pretty fun. There's the Sergeant's Beret, which makes you invisible to the mercs for a certain period of time, and I think this is pretty useful if you're obviously going against the mercs. I would say it's pretty useful in the warlord situations, but other than that, it's obviously not that useful otherwise. And the rest of the items I don't have, unfortunately. There's of course the Golden Mask Filter, Deadwire Detonators, the Disciple Bottle, and the Grenade Bandolier. There's just too much RNG involved in getting these. They don't actually guarantee that you're going to get them when going into the Dark Aether. So unfortunately, I don't really have much to say about them, but they're there, and they're just extra things you can go for, and extra things you can use, and I think that's pretty cool. I wanted to do a quick segment to talk about the perks in this game. We're not going to go through each perk individually and talk about how useful they are necessarily, but I just want to talk about the perk system and how kind of boring it is in this game. There's really just not much to it. You just kind of get the perks when you can, and that's about it. There's really no depth to it. There's no interesting systems to it. And I don't know what they could have done to make it more interesting. Obviously, if they had some sort of upgrade system, I think that would have definitely added to it quite a bit, especially because all of the zombies modes since Black Ops 4 have technically had some sort of perk upgrade system, and then MWZ just decided not to do anything with that at all. You just get the perks, and they're just exactly how they are, and that's about it. And I just, again, don't find it to be that interesting. Most games, I just go straight to the Wonder Fizz and just get all the perks from there. I'm not even going to the individual perk machines. So therefore, I don't really think there's much to talk about with the perks, other than the fact that they just exist. I also hate how the perk icons look on the HUD, by the way. Really don't like that. One of the biggest flaws with this game is the map itself. I feel like we have to talk about how boring Urzikstan is as a map location. Even for Warzone, I don't find it to be that interesting, but when it comes to the zombies mode, there's not a single part of this map that feels zombies almost at all, other than maybe the infection areas with the ether nests. Those can have their zombie moments here or there, but even tier 3 with the orange skybox that it has and a little bit of fog here or there, even that doesn't really have like a zombies feel, at least in my opinion. And I just think the locations are so boring because they're not made for zombies. There's no story there. There's no detail. There's nothing interesting when you're looking around the buildings. It's just a Warzone map. And obviously there's really not much they could have done about that because they're not going to have the time to make a whole original map specifically for this zombies mode. But I think that's what kind of makes this not as enjoyable as round-based zombies in a lot of ways, because at least round-based zombies is usually made specifically for that mode. The map has reasons for everything there, whereas here it's not built for zombies. It's just a Warzone map that happens to have zombies thrown into it, and you can tell these areas are not made to be a zombies location, and I do think that takes away from the enjoyability quite a bit. Of course, there are some areas of this game that do look quite decent, and those areas would of course be the Dark Aether Rifts. I think it's finally time to go through each of the Dark Aether Rifts and talk about the experience you have within each of them. The Dark Aether Rifts were first added with the Season 1 update of Modern Warfare 3, and the way you would actually get into the Dark Aether Rift would be by first completing the Act 4 story mission that was added with that season, which included a giant worm boss fight. You would get 1 relic for completing this boss fight, and then you would now have to get 3 other relics around the map by doing different quests. This way of unlocking the Dark Aether Rifts remained consistent throughout all the seasons, but you only had to do them if you wanted to access the Dark Aether yourself. If somebody else already have accessed the Dark Aether Rift, you actually don't even need to do any of these steps. All you need is just to be in a group with someone who has already completed the relic quests for that specific Dark Aether Rift. You also needed sigils to actually get into the Dark Aether itself. There's 2 separate sigils. There's just regular Dark Aether sigils, and then there's Elder sigils. The Elder sigils will bring you into a much harder version of the Dark Aether, which is also shorter. It's only 15 minutes rather than the 30 minutes that the regular Dark Aether is. And you can also only get schematics in the Elder Dark Aether. You cannot get it in the regular Dark Aether. So most players are going to want to do the Elder Dark Aether, but getting the Elder sigils is a lot harder. You have to earn those within the regular Dark Aether. So it's a whole process of just going to the regular Dark Aether, getting the sigils, then going to Elder Dark Aether later on, and it does take quite a long time. But of course, if you're joining groups consistently, trying to find parties of people that have Elder sigils already, then you can just easily access them with those groups rather than having to earn them yourself. The locations for each of the Dark Aether Rifts were actually taken from the Al Mazrah map and just essentially made to look more like they take place in the Dark Aether. And honestly, I don't love the look of most of them. I think the whole purple, blue crystals and blue skybox look just kind of got old after like maybe the 3rd season in this game. I was kind of tired of it. But once we got to the final map, I think it was a lot cooler. Let's just go through each of them and talk about how I felt about each of the rifts themselves. The first Dark Aether rift took place at the Al Bagra Fortress area of Al Mazrah, and I would say this is definitely the hardest, or at least one of the hardest Dark Aether rifts, which is kind of strange that the first season is definitely one of the hardest, but I think it's because trying to go through the fortress itself, it's quite difficult to navigate, especially when you're trying to get to the exfil portal, and one of the contracts here is the escort tank contract, which is very difficult in the Dark Aether, and overall I've just found myself struggling the most in this Dark Aether rift out of pretty much any of them, except for maybe the last one. The second Dark Aether rift was added with the Season 2 Reloaded update, and it was for Said City. Now this one is extremely easy, probably one of the easiest ones. There's really no trouble I've ever had in this rift, so not much to say about it other than it's okay. It's definitely kind of boring. I think when it's a little harder, it's a little more exciting, but this one is just kind of a breeze. Season 3 Reloaded gave us the Hydroelectric Dark Aether rift, which just like Season 2's, it was also very easy. There's a lot of open space, and there's even these giant yellow lights in the sky that tell you exactly where the contracts are, whereas in the prior Dark Aether rifts, you had to find these little teddy bears to get the contracts. So now they're just a lot easier to get to the contracts. It's a lot easier to basically do anything within this Dark Aether rift. Now, Season 4 did not add a typical Dark Aether rift, and instead they added the Unstable rift, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, but let's go over to Season 5 now, which did in fact add a brand new rift, and this was for Al Mazrah City. And this is by far the best Dark Aether rift, probably the hardest as well, but definitely the most interesting. There's so much cool stuff within. There's a lot of different side quests you can do in it as well. And you have like a train just flying through the sky. You have all sorts of vehicles floating in the air. It's the best utilization of the Dark Aether that we've ever seen in Call of Duty Zombies up to this point. But now let's talk about the Unstable rift that was added in Season 4, because this is by far the worst thing Call of Duty Zombies has possibly ever done, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I don't hate the Unstable rift itself when you're actually in it, like the challenge with the 5 different waves that you have to get through just by constantly killing a bunch of enemies and bosses in this little area. It's actually kind of a fun challenge. Unfortunately, when I tried it, I failed. I only got up to wave 4. I think if I had a larger team or just I was better prepared, I think I would have been a little bit better with it, but it is very challenging, and I like that it's challenging. Maybe not in the most fun way possible, but it's definitely very challenging, which I think is okay. The problem with the Unstable rift is the actual way you get to the Unstable rift itself. It is easily the stupidest, or like I said, one of the stupidest things Zombies has ever done. So essentially what you have to do is go around the map, find 3 different obelisks, and get kills with a specific ammo mod in front of it. And that's all you have to do. And then when you do that, the Unstable rift will open and you can go inside and boom, you're there. And that does not sound difficult whatsoever on paper, but why is it so horrible? Well, first of all, the obelisks themselves, there's only 3 of them, right? There's like over 40 different locations they can spawn in. So you're essentially just going to go around the map aimlessly looking for these obelisks, unless you know the exact locations of them, but like there's fucking 40 of them, like at least 40. I think there's even more than that. So you're just going to be looking around for so long to get to them. And even if you know the locations, you're still going to be going to so many different locations, and it's not that quick to get around the map. If you use the Scorcher, it's obviously a lot easier, but even then, you're spending like 10, 20, sometimes even 30 minutes just looking for these damn obelisks. I've had many games where I've had to try to get to this Unstable rift, and I failed because I just didn't have the ability to actually get around the map quick enough. That's just how the game works. If you have a full squad looking around different sections of the map, it's definitely a lot easier, but not everyone has the luxury to always play with a full squad of players who want to go for the Unstable rift. So if you're doing this solo, good damn luck, because you're probably not going to be able to do it, at least not easily. You also need to have the correct ammo mod when you get there, so if you don't have the correct ammo mod, you got to go find it on the map somewhere, which obviously involves RNG. If you bring it in with your schematics, that's a bit different. You're just going to have it right away, but if you don't have it ready, then now you're going to have to go find it in the loot, which might take some time. But that's not even the worst part about this. The worst part, and what makes it the worst thing Zombies has ever done, or like I said, one of the worst things, is the fact that when you complete all 3 of the obelisks, instead of the portal just spawning right next to you, for some odd reason, it decides to spawn in a random part of the map. And so what this means is if another player gets to that portal before you do, they will get into the Unstable Rift instead of you, and the Unstable Rift will disappear and you cannot get into it yourself. This makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. If you do a quest where you go around the map to complete all these different obelisks, getting the kills in front of them with the ammo mod, you deserve to go into the Unstable Rift. You went on this quest. You went through the difficulty of actually doing that. You deserve to go to the Unstable Rift. Why would it be given to a random player on the map that probably didn't do anything, you know, contributing to getting to the Unstable Rift itself? And the worst part about this is that it actually alerts everyone in the lobby that the Unstable Rift is open, and it tells you exactly where it is. It's not like it only tells yourself and then you have to go find it, so most teams are probably not going to be looking for it anyways. But like, once it alerts everyone in the lobby, a lot of people might go looking for it, and they might even get it before you do, assuming they're closer to the portal than you are, which is why you should definitely use the Scorcher to get around the map quicker. But even that sometimes isn't enough. I've had times where literally within like 5 seconds of completing the last obelisk, someone jumped into the red portal. It makes no sense how that's even possible, but it's happened before, and it is absolutely insane. So what this led to is pretty much nobody even trying to go to the Unstable Rift anymore. I've literally never seen people actually attempting to do it in my own lobby. I've never seen the Unstable Rift notification pop up ever. I've only gotten into it once because of myself actually going for it, and I've tried multiple times, and like I said, there was a couple of those failures, but I've never been in a lobby where other people have tried to go for it, because what's the point? There's not even any good rewards in it. You get a camo for beating it, but it's pretty challenging. So going on that large quest, which might not even lead to actually getting into it, but even if you do, like I said, you're really not going to get any really cool rewards. You're not getting anything like the schematics, so what's really the point at the end of the day? Now, one of the most enjoyable aspects of Call of Duty Zombies are the boss fights. So how were the boss fights in Modern Warfare 3 Zombies? Honestly, it's kind of a mixed bag. Some of them are really good, and some of them are not so good. Let's start this off with talking about the Act 3 story mission Worm boss fight, which I mentioned before. This Worm boss fight was pretty exciting the first time you got to do it, but over time it's kind of lost its value because they've just added other Worm boss fights that are better and more difficult, so this one just kind of doesn't really stand out that much. It's just a bullet sponge. There are certain areas that you should be shooting on the Worm, and I do like the attacks the Worm does. I think it's fun to go up against, but like I said before, because they've added other Worm boss fights later on, I think this one just isn't that enjoyable anymore. One of those would be the Act 4 story mission Purple Worm boss fight, which was of course added with Season 1 update with Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, and it was essentially very similar to this mission where you were fighting a worm, but this time it was in the Dark Ether. And when they first released this, the worm did have a lot more health, but over time they've actually nerfed it, and now it's a lot easier to take out, and it's pretty similar to the Act 3 worm boss fight. It's a little harder because it's in the Dark Ether, but still, it's, I would say, pretty simple, and I would say it's definitely better just because it's in the Dark Ether, so it's a little more exciting because of that, and like I said, just a little more challenging, so I think that's cool. The next boss fight is probably one of the better boss fights in the game, and that is of course the Red Worm boss fight, also known as Greylorm, and Greylorm is pretty damn insane. It's pretty hard to actually get to it. You have to go around the map, find these 4 USB things, and then put them into these consoles right when the Ether Storm starts to surround you after the 45-minute time limit is up, and then it'll call in the Greylorm boss fight. This is by far the hardest boss fight in this game. It is very challenging. There is a lot of health to this worm, and you are not going to be able to take it out easily by yourself. You could, but it is so much easier if you get a squad with you. And something that's really cool about this boss is that this is the only boss in the game where you can have even more than just 6 players attacking the boss, because normally with the other bosses you have to go to a separate area, so you can only go up to how many you have in your squad. You can only have up to 6 people in your squad, so you can't usually have more than 6 people fighting a boss at once. But here you can have multiple squads fighting against this boss, so you can have the entire lobby shooting at the worm. Now, although that's really cool on paper, in practice, it starts to make the game lag a lot, and there has been many crashes during this boss fight because of this. If you have a bunch of people shooting at a same worm all at once with, you know, placing down their sentry guns and shooting their weapons and throwing their Casimirs, it's gonna make it, you know, very hard for your system to remain stable. So a lot of crashes happen here, but it's just still a really cool experience. There's no other experience in Call of Duty Zombies where you can have like over 15 people shooting at a single boss all at once. That is a really cool thing, and I think that's the best thing that this mode was able to provide. But I do think the fact that this is very not a solo-friendly boss whatsoever is kind of disappointing. I do prefer when bosses are scaled depending on how many people are there. If you're playing it solo, it should definitely be at least a bit easier. Then the Season 2 and Season 3 story missions kind of had boss fights, but they were really bootleg boss fights where you're just essentially fighting an existing boss in the game. So I think that was kind of stupid. It's not like anything special. It's not a unique boss that's specifically made for the boss fight. It's just taking, you know, an existing boss and just giving it more health and just saying, oh, here's a boss fight. So neither of these were that cool or that interesting, but I wanted to mention them at least if you were, curious about how many other boss fights were technically in the game. Then I would say the coolest boss fight, and definitely one of my favorite boss fights of all time in Call of Duty Zombies, came with the Season 5 update with the Entity boss fight. This is actually a really well-made boss. It's decently difficult. I wouldn't say it's that hard though. It's not nearly as hard as Greylorm. This is one you can definitely do solo just fine, but especially the first time doing it, it took me a while, and it's one of those exciting bosses where once you finish it, it gives you the, but wait, there's more moments, and then the boss just comes back and you have to now attack it again, but in a kind of a different way. So that makes it really exciting and enjoyable, and I like how the boss works. It kind of reminds me of Legion from Black Ops Cold War Zombies, but I do think it works better than Legion and is actually more fun than Legion. And you have these different islands that are floating. You can kind of go to different ones by using the jump pads, kind of similar to Ancient Evil's boss fight. Definitely the best part of this entire experience. Like, not just the best boss in this game, I would say this is the best part of the entire Modern Warfare Zombies experience. All in all, Modern Warfare 3 Zombies just feels like a mode that was doomed to fail from the very start because there just was not enough resources put into it. Clearly, Treyarch did not have enough time to actually do a lot with this mode, and it was only thrown into the game so that Modern Warfare 3 could have a third mode within their game, because otherwise there wouldn't be any third mode. I was already pretty skeptical because having no round-based zombies for a whole year and instead replacing it with this open world experience kind of rubbed me the wrong way from the start. But I'm definitely open to the idea of open world zombies if implemented properly, but it really does require a lot more resources than Treyarch was able to handle during this year. I think it honestly would have been a lot safer and a lot better if they just went with a simple round-based experience similar to what they were doing with the end of Vanguard's lifecycle, where they did Shi No Numa Reborn and the Archon. Just having smaller round-based maps that they can focus their time more so on, rather than having to deal with this giant experience that kind of requires constant updates for it to remain relevant. And instead, the only way they allowed this game to actually remain relevancy was with a bunch of mechanics and features that just simply felt like they were wasting your time. There was more time put into this game just going around and grinding the different things in the game rather than actually just sitting down and playing for fun. I rarely sat down and actually played Modern Warfare Zombies purely just to have fun. Sure, I had fun here or there. There was definitely lots of fun moments, but I felt like most of it was just me trying to experience as much of the mode as possible so I can actually do a thorough review of the mode. If I wasn't a YouTuber, I wasn't a content creator, I probably wouldn't have played this mode nearly as much. With all this being said, I'm going to give Modern Warfare Zombies a final rating of 5 out of 10, which might not seem that low to a lot of you, but in comparison, I would rate most Zombies modes at least a 7 out of 10 or higher. So this tells you that there was definitely a lot of issues plaguing this mode, a lot of things holding it back from being a lot better. But ultimately, I couldn't rate it anything lower than a 5 out of 10 because I still had a lot of fun with this mode. I had a good time with it. There was really solid moments. But like I said before, there was just so many issues that plague it to the point where I just don't think this is a Zombies mode I would revisit that frequently. Even a lot of the other bad Zombies modes out there I would revisit. This is one I don't think I'm going to revisit much at all. Despite all of this, I do hope we get an open world Zombies experience in the future that actually has a lot more resources put into it, and hopefully the gameplay flow just works a lot better and is more friendly to the average player. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below about Modern Warfare Zombies. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you enjoy any aspects of it? I would love to hear your thoughts. I will see you all on my next one. Peace out.